Hey, true crime fanatics, I'm Jake Barton, creator of the history storytelling podcast called Historium, and you're listening to Killafornia Dreaming on the Orbital JIGSAW network.
This episode of Killafornia Dreaming is brought to you by BLUBRRY. Creating a podcast isn't that simple. It's more than just recording yourself and uploading it. To really get your show to be everything you want it to be, you're going to need a little more than that. You need easy, reliable hosting so your time can be spent creating your content. The most accurate download stats so you know if you're reaching the audience that you're wanting to. And a web page that makes setting up totally easy on you and won't take up too much of your valuable time. And BLUBRRY offers all of this and more for hosts and aspiring hosts alike. Simple media hosting, a fully integrated WordPress website with their PowerPress sites. So, if you already have a podcast or you've always dreamed about starting one, head over to orbitaljigsaw.com/dream to sign up, and the first month is on me. The BLUBRRY support team is available to walk you through the steps of migrating your show without losing any subscribers, or to help you get started in the process of launching your new show. With the first month for free, using promo code DREAM, you've got no excuses. And now, on to the show. And once again, I must provide this warning for this episode. This is the third and final part of a 3-part series on the Isla Vista massacre of 2014. If you have not yet listened to parts 1 and 2, which are episodes 50 and 51, then you should listen to those first and then come back to this. Also, this story includes graphic details involving gun violence, stabbings, and innocent people being run down by a moving vehicle that may be disturbing to listen to. Much of the content of these 3 episodes will contain the writings of the perpetrator of this crime. He expresses a great deal of vitriol and hateful words, filled with derogatory and disparaging language, aimed mostly at women, but also include themes involving racism and homophobia, much of which I will rephrase or omit altogether. There is also sexually explicit content as well, so this would not be suitable for young listeners, nor is it suitable for work. Listener discretion is advised. Okay, dreamers, so the last time in part 2, I recounted a great deal of the manifesto penned by the Isla Vista mass murderer, Elliot Rodger. We listened as he whined and pouted and complained and cried about his dreadful teen years. We saw him deal with puberty, high school, obsessions with video games, and the beginnings of an obsession with becoming rich and powerful, but not really having any desire to work for it. He came across as a spoiled, entitled brat who never stopped tantruming no matter how old he got. He hung on to his mom out of fear of having to leave childhood behind. He resented his dad and hated his stepmom. But to be honest, stepmom probably had a keen sense of how disturbed Rodger was. She seemed to know from the beginning that he needed boundaries and strict rules, but he refused to abide by any of them, opting to shun his father and run home to mommy whenever something happened that he didn't like. He got bullied more throughout school, and I'm on the fence about how I feel about that, only because we know what kind of a person Rodger was. We know how his story ends, but the bullying is never really going to sit well with me. I know kids are like that. Some can be mean, whatever. I just know that I'm not going to look at any instances of bullying, no matter who that child grows up to be, and be okay with it. With that being said, let's get on with the 3rd part of this manifesto. I've tried to isolate portions of it that stood out to me as we count down the final 3 years of this. And at the end, we're going to take a look at the movement that developed and gained momentum in the years following the events in Isla Vista in 2014. The Incel movement. and how this perpetrator has become a symbol of their cause. Santa Barbara, endgame, age 19 to 22. For the first time in my life, I was living independently, miles away from my parents, in a new town. I felt a sudden sense of anxiety, fear, and trepidation. But I also felt the sense of hope that my life could possibly change for the better. The very first night was traumatic and gave me a very bad taste about everything. Through my window, I heard a lot of students partying outside, and I wondered, with a great amount of fear, how would I ever be able to join them in their fun? That was the reason I was here after all. I didn't think I was capable of it. Later in the night, I heard a boy and a girl having sex in the apartment above me. Just knowing that other young men get to enjoy the pleasures of sex while I get none of it has always filled me with envious rage, as well as bitter hatred towards the world. But to actually hear them doing it, that was even more traumatizing. I was prepared for this, however. I had done a lot of research about college life in the town of Isla Vista, and I knew that students had a lot of sex there. I had an inkling of a suspicion that I would eventually hear or even see people doing such things if I lived in that environment. Hell, the reason I moved there was because it was a sexually active place. I myself wanted to be sexually active. But when I heard that couple above me having sex, I couldn't help feel vile and miserable about it. I tried to calm myself down and convince myself that soon I will be doing the same exact thing. How wrong I was. My first week turned out to be very unpleasant, leaving a horrific first impression on my new life in Santa Barbara. My two housemates were nice, but they kept inviting over this friend of theirs named Chance, who was a black boy who came over all the time, and I hated his cocksure attitude. Inevitably, a vile incident occurred between me and him. I was eating a meal in the kitchen when he came over and started bragging to my housemates about his success with girls. I couldn't stand it, so I proceeded to ask them all if they were virgins. They all looked at me weirdly and said that they had lost their virginity long ago. I felt so inferior, as it reminded me of how much I missed out in life. And then this black boy named Chance said that he lost his virginity when he was only 13. In addition, he said that the girl he lost his virginity to was a blonde white girl. I was so enraged that I almost splashed him with my orange juice. I indignantly told him that I did not believe him, and then I went to my room and cried. I cried and cried and cried, and then I called my mother and cried to her on the phone. How could an inferior, ugly black boy be able to get a white girl and not me? I am beautiful, and I am half white myself. I am descended from British aristocracy. He is descended from slaves. I deserve it more. I tried not to believe his foul words, but they were already said, and it was hard to erase from my mind. If this was actually true, if this ugly black filth was able to have sex with the blonde white girl at the age of 13, while I had to suffer virginity all my life, then this just proves how ridiculous the female gender is. They would give themselves to this filthy scum, but they reject me. The injustice. Females truly have something mentally wrong with them. Their minds are flawed, and at this point, I was beginning to see it. Dreamers, this is literally the first time that I can recall that I've had to read back hateful words such as these, and a part of me almost didn't want to. But at the same time, you get this real look into how people like this think and how their minds work. This guy has to put people down in order to build himself up. and everybody is fair game as far as he's concerned. British aristocracy. Ugh. Whatever. Okay, let's go on. The more I explored my college town of Isla Vista, the more ridiculousness I witnessed. All of the beautiful girls walked around with obnoxious, tough, jock-type men who partied all the time and acted crazy. They should be going for intelligent gentlemen such as myself. Women are sexually attracted to the wrong type of man. This is a major flaw in the very foundation of humanity. It is completely and utterly wrong in every sense of the word. As these truths fully dawned on me, I became deeply disturbed by them. Deeply disturbed, offended, and traumatized. Soon enough, my summer session at Santa Barbara City College began. I had enrolled for 2 classes, a history class and a geography class. The history class started at 8 o'clock in the morning. When my alarm rang, I enthusiastically put on one of my new shirts and I got ready for my first day of my new college. The weather was sunny and bright as I made the drive down the 101 freeway. This was it. This was the moment of truth. My whole life has led to this. I was starting a new college in a beautiful new town. This was my fresh start to attain the life I've been craving for so long. If I am unable to make it in this opportunistic environment, then I'm doomed forever. I felt a surge of confidence as I ascended the flight of stairs that led to the main campus. For my first class, which was history, I had to cross the iconic bridge to the West Campus. I tried to feel as confident and sure of myself as possible, thinking that all the girls I passed were attracted to my appearance. They should be. I spent a long time choosing out that shirt and doing my hair. When I reached the classroom, I saw some pretty girls waiting outside. My new classmates, I thought with excitement. I was a bit dismayed that they didn't pay any attention to me. They didn't even look at me. I was sure I had an attractive appearance that day, but those girls didn't seem to notice it. Perhaps I was deluding myself. As all of the students started pouring in, a group of typical popular type boys sat near me. Their overly social and obnoxious personalities offended me, and I felt like getting up and leaving. They somehow knew all of the pretty girls in class, and it broke my heart to watch them chat up the girls. How could I compete with those popular kids? I hated them so much. I've wanted to be like them all my life, ever since elementary school, but they never accepted me. They have caused my life to be a living hell for so long. Right then, on the very first day of SBCC, I was going through the exact same thing I did at every other school I'd been to. The feeling of being a lonely, unwanted outcast. That class was horrible, but I didn't want to give up so soon. I couldn't. My whole life depended on my success at Santa Barbara. I attended my geography class next. This class was much more interesting and more relaxed, but it didn't have any pretty girls in it. After lunch, I walked over to the cafeteria area, and I saw many pretty blonde girls sitting around. I wish I had the courage to go up to them and ask one of them on a date, but they would have just seen me as a creep. Girls are so cruel. After I left the campus, I drove around downtown Santa Barbara to explore new areas. I went up and down State Street, the main common of the city area where everyone frequents. I can only imagine how heavenly it would be to walk with a beautiful girl down that street. My life would be complete if I get to do that. It would be the epitome of gratifying perfection. To have a beautiful blonde girl by my side, to feel her hand clasping my own as we walked everywhere together, to feel her love. That is what I want in life. Instead, I had to watch other men experience my idea of heaven while I rot in bitter loneliness. And there were a lot of young couples on State Street. I quickly drove back to my apartment and cried to myself, soaking my pillow in tears of agony. So far, Santa Barbara was not working. I dreaded how horrible it would be to continue suffering my miserable, lonely, celibate life in such a beautiful city where everyone else experienced the pleasures of sex and love. That would be the darkest hell. And that was exactly what was in store for me. My father drove up to Santa Barbara to meet me a few days later. The two of us went to have lunch in the Camino Real marketplace. We sat down at our table. I saw a young couple sitting a few tables down the row. The sight of them enraged me to no end, especially because it was a dark-skinned Mexican guy with a hot blonde white girl. I regarded it as a great insult to my dignity. How could an inferior Mexican guy be able to date a white blonde girl while I was still suffering as a lonely virgin? I was ashamed to be in such an inferior position in front of my father. When I saw the two of them kissing, I can barely contain my rage. I stood up in anger, and I was about to walk up to them and pour my glass of soda all over their heads. I probably would have if father wasn't there. I was seething with envious rage, and my father was there to watch all of it. It was so humiliating. I wasn't the son I wanted to present to my father. I should be the one with the blonde girl, making my father proud. Instead, my father had to watch me suffer in a pathetic position. Life is so cruel to me. When I said farewell to my father before he left home, I felt absolutely miserable. I then went back to my room and sulked for hours. Another incident happened on the following day near the same location. I went to Starbucks in the Camino Real marketplace by myself, like I usually did every morning. I ordered my coffee and sat down at one of their chairs to relax. A few moments later, when I looked up for my drink, I saw a young couple standing in line. The two of them were kissing passionately. The boy looked like an obnoxious punk. He was tall and wore baggy pants. And the girl was a pretty blonde. And they looked like they were in the throes of passionate sexual attraction to each other, rubbing their bodies together and tongue-kissing in front of everyone. I was absolutely livid with envious hatred. When they left the store, I followed them to their car and splashed my coffee all over them. The boy yelled at me and I quickly ran away in fear. I was panicking as I got into my car and drove off, shaking with rage-fueled excitement. I drove all the way to the Vons at the Fairview Plaza and spent 3 hours in my car trying to contain my tumultuous emotions. I had never struck back at my enemies before, and I felt a small sense of spiteful gratification for doing so. I hated them so much. Even though I splashed them with my coffee, he was still the winner. He was going to go home and have passionate heavenly sex with his beautiful girlfriend, and I was going to go home to my lonely room to sleep alone in my lonely bed. I had never felt so miserable and mistreated in my life. Dreamers, this marks the first time Rodger actually physically acted out against other people due to his narcissism and overblown sense of entitlement. It's the beginning of a very troubling pattern of behavior on the part of Rodger. And for his dad to witness his anger boil over in that restaurant that day and still not find himself concerned with his son's behavior is very bothersome. It's hard to believe that he couldn't see how disturbed he is. So it leads me to believe that Dad was in denial. Anyway, let's go on. I curse the world for condemning me to such a suffering. I wanted to do horrible things to that couple. I wanted to inflict pain on all young couples. It was around this point in my life that I realized that I was capable of doing such things. I would happily do such things. I was capable of killing them, and I wanted to. I wanted to kill them slowly, to strip the skins off their flesh. They deserve it. The males deserve it for taking the females away from me, and the females deserve it for choosing those males instead of me. I have never been a violent person by nature, but after building up so much hatred over the years, I realized that I wouldn't hesitate to kill or even torture my hated enemies if I was given the opportunity. I spent the next 5 days in my room trying to forget about the horrific experiences I had to go through. But even in my room, I couldn't escape from being reminded of my worthlessness. Every time I looked out my window to the courtyard, I saw young people socializing. Obnoxious drunk boys were chatting up pretty girls, and I wondered, with great panic, if they would be having sex together in the night. I often fantasized about barging in their rooms while they had sex and slashing them to death with my knife. I then realized I only had 12 more days as a teenager. I was going to turn 20 soon. One of my hopes was to lose my virginity before the time I was a teenager was over. Being a virgin at the age of 20 would make me feel very defeated. On one of my last days as a teenager, I sat in my usual place at the food court outside Domino's. I saw a sight that shattered my heart to pieces. A tall, blonde, jock-type guy walked into one of the restaurants, and at his side was one of the sexiest girls I'd ever seen. She too was tall and blonde, and they were both taller than me, and they kissed each other passionately. They made me feel so inferior and worthless and small. I glared at them with intense hatred as I sat by myself in my lonely misery. I could never have a girl like that. The sight was burned into my memory, and it caused a scar that would haunt me forever. When they walked away, I followed them in my car for a few minutes. And when they entered a less inhabited area, I opened my window and splashed my iced tea all over them. It was all I could do at the time, but at least it was something. At least I made some effort to fight back against the injustice. I felt sick with hatred that night. The hatred boiled inside me with burning vitriol. I was no longer a teenager, and I'll never be able to experience sex as a teenager. My teenage years were completely denied to me by the cruelness of women. The only way I could make up for it was if I had an extraordinary sex life in my 20s. I would have to have a profoundly amazing decade in my 20s to compensate for all the misery I experienced in my teens. If I fail to do that, then I have nothing to live for. Sadly, I would only experience the opposite in my early 20s, and it will destroy me. I had a month left until the new semester started, and I could use that time to prepare and recuperate. My new housemates were meant to move into the second bedroom of my apartment on August 5th. I had an anxious feeling of anticipation for what they would be like. August 5th came quickly, and I prepared myself to be in a pleasant mood to meet them. Their names were Ryan and Angel, and to my dismay, they were of Hispanic race. In addition, the two of them were already friends with each other, which meant that they could possibly gang up on me if there were any conflicts to arise. They also seemed like rowdy, low-class types. My first impression of them soured me, but I tried to be pleasant and not show it. The two of them acted cordial to me on the first day, but after observing them for a bit, I had a bad feeling that they would be trouble to live with, and they were meant to be my housemates for a whole year. When I was alone in my room, I panicked to myself at how dire a situation this was. This was extremely disappointing. I was hoping I would get decent, mature, clean-cut housemates. Instead, I got low-class scum. On the second day, they started inviting their equally rowdy friends into my apartment, and we exchanged more small talk. To my indignant surprise, they asked me the question I've been always dreading. Are you a virgin? I admitted that I was a virgin. I always admitted the truth about this. It was my life struggle, and I couldn't lie about such a thing. Then they all had the audacity to tell me when they lost their virginities long ago, bragging about the girls that they had slept with. I particularly hated Angel because of his ugly pig face. How could such an ugly animal have sexual experiences with girls and I yet haven't? What was wrong with the world? I got so angry that I went to my room and punched the wall. They heard me and started laughing. It was almost a repeat of what I experienced with the black boy named Chance in the old apartment, except this time it was worse because they were my housemates for the year. On the day after, I almost got into a physical fight with Angel. The ugly pig kept acting as if girls thought he was more attractive than me. Ha! I am a beautiful, magnificent gentleman, and he is a low-class pig-faced thug. I had enough of his cocksure attitude, and I started to call him exactly what he was. I tried to insult him as much as I could, telling him how superior I am to him, and saying that he was low class. He tried to attack me, but Ryan, being the more mellow of the two, held him back. A pity. I was itching for a chance to hurt that obnoxious little animal, though I suppose it was for the best. My life was too important to risk doing anything rash. In a panic, I immediately called my mother as soon as I could and told her of the dire situation. There was no way I could live with these two imbeciles for the entire college year. They had already ruined my weekend. My mother agreed that I needed to get out of there, so I went to the leasing office and explained to the manager everything that had happened. He told me that there was another room available for me to transfer to, but it would cost $100 more a month. But it was a larger 2-bedroom unit, and I would be sharing it with one housemate, who could occupy the other room. I called my mother and she gave me permission to go through with it. I signed the new lease, arranged to transfer to the other room available in September. I would have to bear living with them for the rest of the month until then. During the last few days that I had to endure living with those two barbaric housemates, I often walked out to Isla Vista hoping that I would meet a girl and take her home with me. I wanted to prove to them that all the girls liked me, to see the look on their faces when they see a girl by my side. But of course, I had nothing to prove because girls didn't like me. Every time I tried to go out and meet a girl, I ended up walking home alone in anger. On one of those nights, I crossed paths with a boy who was walking with two pretty girls. I got so envious that I cursed at them, and then I followed them for a few minutes. They just laughed at me, and one of the girls kissed the boy on the lips. I'm assuming she was his girlfriend. That was one of the worst experiences of torture from girls that I had to endure, and it will be a scar in my memory forever, to remind me that girls think I'm unworthy compared to other boys. I ran home with tears pouring down my cheeks, hoping that my horrible housemates wouldn't be there to witness my shame. I tried to spark a positive attitude on the first day of my autumn semester at Santa Barbara City College. I was registered for 3 classes: history, astronomy, and math. I had to wait a couple of hours before my math class started, and I spent those hours roaming around the college or sitting in the library, looking at all the hot girls and wishing I could have one as a girlfriend. I was like a starving man surrounded by a feast that I was prohibited to eat. All my classes left me feeling hopeless and depressed. I had a horrible feeling that I was in for a very miserable time in Santa Barbara. Once I was given the keys to the new apartment, I quickly transported all of my belongings to the new place. I was supposed to have only one housemate who would live in the other room of the unit, but he hadn't moved in yet. He was set to arrive in 2 weeks, so I had the place to myself until then. I unpacked all of my things and set out my new room. Once I was done, I looked at it and thought to myself that this was it. This was my new living place in the college town of Isla Vista. And if I could finally have the life I wanted, this may well be the room where I lose my virginity. How wrong I was. It would only be another room where I suffer miserable loneliness. No girl will ever step foot in it. Santa Barbara was not going well for me. I was already months into my 20th year, and I had nothing to show for it. As I spent the first weeks of September in my new room, all alone, I fully realized how much I was failing at life. Santa Barbara was supposed to be a place of hope, a place where I could start anew, a happy life. I couldn't believe how wrong everything was turning out. Instead of finally getting a chance to live a life of sex and love like other young people did, I only experienced worse rejection and humiliation than I'd ever experienced before. This was unbelievable and unforgivable. If humanity continued to insult me with such cruelty, then there really is no hope for my happiness in life. At Santa Barbara City College, I had the exact same experience that I had at Moore Park. I had to watch beautiful young people enjoying their lives together as I languished in loneliness and despair because no one accepted me. I dropped my math class. I just couldn't bear having to be at the same college all day long, sitting in the library watching couples kiss each other. I retained my 2 morning classes only because there was still a small inkling of desperate hope inside of me. My usual day went as follows. I woke up alone in bed with no girl beside me. I did a few minutes of exercise before I showered and got ready for school. I then drove to Starbucks to have my morning latte and felt envious whenever I saw a young couple there. I would then attend my 2 classes where no one said a word to me, having to endure the torment of watching other guys talking to the girls that I liked. And then I would go home alone, open the door to my lonely room, and felt absolutely miserable. The loneliness was suffocating. I could barely breathe. If only one pretty girl had at least given me a chance and tried to get to know me, everything would have turned out differently. But girls continued to treat me with disdain. The loneliness was torturing me so intensely that I even started up my World of Warcraft account and played the game constantly for the month of September. For young adults, Halloween is a very different sort of holiday, of which one is supposed to dress up in sexually explicit costumes and attend wild drinking parties and have sexual experiences with girls. For other young people who are able to do such things, Halloween must be a blast. But I am unable to do such things. I wasn't invited to any party, and girls don't want to have sex with me. As a teenager and young adult, Halloween has been a holiday of torment and depression because of this. So the only way that I could gain a boost to my self-esteem was to buy better looking clothes. My mother had given me a few more gift cards to Nordstrom's, and I spent them on $200 designer jeans. When I wore these to school, I saw that I was wearing better jeans than most other guys, and that made me have a slightly higher sense of self-worth. I bought a few more shirts, a new pair of Hugo Boss sneakers. Doing this started a new obsession for me. I became more and more obsessed with my appearance. Because my mother, father, and grandmother constantly paid me extra money now that I was living in Santa Barbara, I had saved up enough money to indulge this obsession. Familiarizing myself with all of the top designer brands, I bought new clothes every time I visited my hometown. My favorite brands were Hugo Boss and Armani. I always stopped by the Camarillo shopping center on the way back to Santa Barbara. I loved it there. They had a store for almost every brand. One time, as I was shopping in the Calvin Klein store in Camarillo, I saw such a beautiful blonde with perfectly tan skin. She was so beautiful and sexy. Oh, the heavenly things I wanted to do to her. And then I saw her hunk of a boyfriend. My entire being was filled with anguish and despair. I could only imagine how amazing and pleasurable that guy's life was. In my history class, I kept feeling weak with inferiority as I watched this tall, handsome blonde jock constantly sit and talk with 2 beautiful girls. There was no way I couldn't watch it. They were in the middle of the class. I hated that class so much, and I decided to stop attending it until the final exam. Once I took the final, I was glad to be done with those horrifically frustrated college classes. It was just as I had feared. My first actual semester at Santa Barbara College was an absolute brutal failure. I didn't even have one girl's phone number in my cell phone. Was I going to be a virgin forever? I frantically wondered as I drove away from school after taking my exams. I felt like my whole life was over. If I couldn't make it in such a beautiful and opportunistic place like Santa Barbara, then I was doomed to misery and dissatisfaction. I knew that I would rather die than suffer such a fate, and I knew that if it came to that, I would do everything I could to exact revenge before I died. I tried to adopt a sophisticated and suave persona and made my accent more eloquent. I did this out of the hope that girls would find something attractive about it. It was the only persona that truly fit me. I was incapable of being an outgoing, boisterous jock, and I didn't want to become one. I was disgusted by such people. I was disgusted at how girls were attracted to such filth. I wanted them to be attracted to me. That's how it should be, and I deserved it. During the few weeks I had before my first day of class, I couldn't really do anything to improve my social situation. I had a fear of going out to Isla Vista without any friends, and I was hoping to make some once college started. Because of this, I became depressed again from all of the loneliness. Even though my housemate Spencer was there, I felt completely and utterly alone, as the two of us never talked that much. So far, Spencer and I had gotten along quite well, despite the fact that we never talked. An incident happened at the end of January that changed all of this. I one day discovered that Spencer had a girl in his room, and I couldn't believe it. This short, chubby guy was able to get a girl in his room before I did. I was so shocked and outraged that I waited outside his room until the girl left so I could get a glimpse of how she looked. To my relief, she wasn't that attractive. What made me even more angry is that Spencer gave me the smug look when I saw the girl, even though she was ugly. He had the nerve to feel like he was better than me, just because he managed to get a girl over to the apartment before I did. I confronted him in the kitchen on that same night, telling him that he is foolish to feel proud about having an ugly whore in his room. This made him angry and offended, which is what I wanted. I wanted to offend him as a punishment for his insolence. After that incident, the two of us became more and more hostile towards each other. In the beginning of February, my spring semester at Santa Barbara City College began. I knew that if the same thing happens in the coming semester, I would end up dropping all of my classes. And if that happened, all of my hope would be doomed. On the morning of the first day of class, I donned my fabulous Armani Exchange shirt, and I put on my new Gucci sunglasses that my mother gave me. I admired myself in the mirror for a few moments and began to feel a surge of enthusiasm. I wanted everyone to see me looking like that. I was hopeful that some girls would admire me. I said to myself that there was no way I could possibly have trouble getting the girls now. I stopped by at Starbucks to buy a latte and set off for college with the confidence that I would appear as a superior gentleman to all of the students out there. I was a superior gentleman. That was what I was born to be, and now it was time to show the world. It was a bright, sunny day as I ascended the familiar steps up to the beautiful college campus of SBCC. I immediately went to the restroom to look at myself in the mirror a few times, just so that I could feel more assured of myself. Yes, I thought, I am the image of beauty and supremacy. I kept saying it over and over again, as if it was a mantra. And when I crossed the renowned bridge that connected the two halves of the campus, I felt as if everyone was admiring me. As I passed by a group of girls, I pretended to imagine that they secretly adored me and wanted me. After all, that was how it was meant to be. The more I walked around campus, the more I tried to convince myself that this was the case. My first class was sociology, and I waited until everyone was seated before I walked in. I came in through the front entrance so that everyone could look at my fabulous self. To my utter dismay, I saw that no one turned their head to look at me at all. No girl tilted a head or lifted a pretty little eyebrow at my approach. After all that effort, I was still being treated like I was invisible. As I made my way back from school one day during the first week, I was stopped at a spotlight in Isla Vista when I saw two hot blonde girls waiting at the bus stop. I was dressed in one of my nice shirts, so I looked at them and smiled. They looked at me, but they didn't even smile back. They just looked away as if I was a fool. As I drove away, I became infuriated. It was such an insult. This was the way all girls treated me, and I was sick and tired of it. In a rage, I made a U-turn and pulled up to their bus stop and splashed my Starbucks latte all over them. I felt a feeling of spiteful satisfaction when I saw it stain their jeans, and then I quickly sped away before they could catch my license plate number. How dare those girls snub me in such a fashion? How dare they insult me so? I raged this to myself repeatedly. They deserved the punishment I gave them. It was such a pity that my latte wasn't hot enough to burn them. Those girls deserved to be dumped in boiling water for the crime of not giving me the attention and adoration I so rightly deserve. I began to question what I was doing so wrong. I saw obnoxious slobs who dressed in basketball shorts and t-shirts walking around with hot girls. And there I was, decked out in Armani, all by myself. It was preposterous. I should have been the one walking with the hot girls. I soon realized that no one really cared at all about how well I dressed. No girls admired me. No girls even gave me a second look. I soon found out the name of the beautiful girl in my math class. Her name was Brittany. Being the obsessed stalker that I was, I looked her up on Facebook, and what I found shattered my already wounded heart to pieces. She had a boyfriend, and not only that, her boyfriend was the type of boy I've always hated and despised. A tall, muscular surfer jock with a buzz cut. As I looked at all the pictures of the two of them together, I shivered with pure hatred. I could physically feel the hatred burn through my entire body. I wanted to kill both of them, and I was capable of doing it. Brittany should have been mine, and if I can't have her, no one should. I fantasized about capturing the two of them and stripping the skin off of her boyfriend's body while making her watch. Why must my life be so full of torment and hatred? I questioned the universe, with turmoil boiling inside of me. I screamed and cried with anguish that day. My housemate Spencer heard it all, but I didn't care. I dropped my math class immediately after learning that Brittany had a boyfriend. I couldn't look at her beauty anymore, knowing that some punk was able to enjoy having sex with her every day. I can only imagine how heavenly that guy's life must be. He was in heaven and I was in hell. Shortly after dropping my math class, I decided to drop all of my other classes in a rage. There was no point to it anymore. No matter how hard I tried, girls were not attracted to me. What was the point of going through college, getting a degree, and finding some mundane professional job afterwards if I could never experience the pleasure of girls along the way? I didn't want to torture myself with going to college and looking at all of those beautiful girls I could never have. Nothing beneficial came out of it. There was no hope for me to ever have a desirable college life. My life was devoid of friends, devoid of girls, devoid of sex, and devoid of love. I realized that I would never be able to look back on my youth, the time that I should have been having a blast, and feel satisfied about all of the happy memories I have. There were no happy memories, only misery, loneliness, rejection, and pain. The only thing I could do was even the score. I wanted to make everyone else suffer, just like they made me suffer. I wanted revenge. When I dropped my college classes, I crossed a threshold that I knew existed, but I never actually believed I would cross. It completely ended all hope that I had of living a desirable life in Santa Barbara. I realized that I would be a virgin forever, condemned to suffer rejection and humiliation at the hands of women because they don't fancy me, because their sexual attractions are flawed. They are attracted to the wrong type of male. I always mused to myself that I would rather die than suffer such an existence, and I knew that if it came to that, I would exact my revenge upon the world in the most catastrophic way possible. At least then, I would die knowing that I fought back against the injustice that had been dealt to me. Ever since my life took a very dark turn at the age of 17, I often had fantasies of how malevolently satisfying it would be to punish all of the popular kids and young couples for the crimes of having a better life than me. I dreamed of how sweet it would be to torture or kill every single young couple I saw. However, as I've said previously in this story, I never thought I would actually go through with these drastic desires. I had hoped inside me that I could one day have a happy life. It was only when I first moved to Santa Barbara that I started considering the possibility of having to carry out a violent act of revenge as the final solution in dealing with all of the injustices I had to face at the hands of women and society. I came up with a name for this after I saw all the good-looking young couples walking around my college and in the town of Isla Vista. I named it the Day of Retribution. It would be a day in which I would exact my ultimate retribution and revenge on all of the hedonistic scum who enjoyed lives of pleasure that they didn't deserve. If I can't have it, I will destroy it. I will destroy all women because I can't have them. I will make them all suffer for rejecting me. I will arm myself with deadly weapons and wage a war against all women and the men they are attracted to. I will slaughter them like the animals that they are. If they won't accept me among them, then they are my enemies. They showed me no mercy, and I in turn will show them no mercy. The prospect would be so sweet, and the justice will ultimately be served. And of course, I would have to die in the act to avoid going to prison. That is when I realized that this threshold existed, and if I crossed it, I will have to carry out this day of retribution. It has remained stagnant and in the back of my mind ever since, until this point. After dropping my spring classes at Santa Barbara City College, I knew that the day of retribution was now very possible. I even wrote about it in my diary, but I later tore out the pages because I feared someone might find them. A shiver ran through me, realizing how twisted my world had become, that I would have to resort to doing something that I would consider unthinkable a few years ago. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to live. Thinking about the day of retribution made me feel trapped. I wanted a way out. After some deep contemplation, I had the revelation that the day of retribution wasn't the only way I could make up for all the suffering I'd experienced. If I could somehow become a multimillionaire at a young age, then my lifestyle would instantly become better than most people my age. I would be able to get revenge on all of my enemies just by living above them and lording over them. That was a form of happy, peaceful revenge, and it became my only hope. Once again, I started to desperately ponder over ways I could become extremely wealthy at a very young age. It was my only way out. This is when I realized that wealth was the only way I could lose my virginity, the only way I could have the beautiful girlfriend I know I deserve. Due to all of my past experiences with girls, it is evident that girls are not attracted to me as a person. They are repulsed by me. The only way that I could possibly become worthy of their love and attraction is if I become wealthy. In the beginning of March, I went home in a sullen, disturbed mood. I did my best to hide it from my parents. I also had to hide the fact that I dropped all of my college classes, and I kept up the pretense that I was still attending college, talking to my father about my lectures and so forth. The weekend that I visited home was quite an eventful one, and I had been looking forward to it for some time. On Sunday, March 11, 2012, I went with my mother and sister to a private, exclusive Katy Perry concert. And on March 12, 2012, I went with my father and Samoya to the red carpet premiere of The Hunger Games. I was eager to go because I loved attending these exclusive events. It made me feel special. For most of the time spent at the concert, I just walked around and ate the food at the buffet while everyone waited for Katy Perry to perform. There was upbeat music playing the entire time, and a lot of wealthy families with their kids attending. Every family there must have had a net worth of at least $20 million to be able to hire private jets. I tried to pretend as if I was part of a wealthy family. I should be. That was the life I was meant to live. I would be, if only my damnable mother had married into wealth instead of being selfish. If only my failure of a father had made better decisions with his directing career instead of wasting his money on that stupid documentary. I couldn't help but feel a bitter form of envy at all of the rich kids at the concert. They grew up in lavish mansions, indulged in excessive opulence, and will never have to worry about anything in their pleasurable, hedonistic lives. I would take great pleasure in watching all of those rich families burn alive. Looking at all of them really drilled into my mind the importance of wealth. Wealth is one of the most important defining factors of self-worth and superiority. I hated and envied all of those kids for being born into wealth, while I had to struggle to find a way to claim wealth for myself. I had to be ruthless and do whatever it takes to attain such wealth. After all, it was my only hope of ever being worthy of getting a girlfriend and living the life of gratification that I desire. Okay, dreamers, so at this point in his manifesto, Rodgers is going to go into this long tirade about going back to school and having no obligations, but he hasn't told his parents about dropping out of his classes. So he gets back from the movie premiere with his family trying to figure out a way to get rich quick. And he was desperate. And he'd come to the conclusion that the only way that he was going to be able to attract women is to be wealthy. So he revisited his idea to play the lottery. Rodger had several $1,000s saved up, so he started spending $50 to $100 on tickets on each drawing. He envisioned himself going to school in a Lamborghini, and as the jackpot increased, he spent more and more money on lottery tickets. And when the jackpot reached $656 million, he bought $700 worth of lotto tickets. Elliot Rodger was literally riding his entire future on the California lottery. After the ultimate fateful drawing, I waited 3 days to check the results. I was too anxious about what I would see. The results would determine the fate of my whole life. For those 3 days, I meditated alone in my room, trying to convince myself that I was the winner. I held all of the tickets in my hand, excitedly pondering over which one was the true winning ticket. On the 4th day, I decided to go through with it. I had to see the truth. My heart was beating rapidly as I loaded up the web pages to the Mega Millions website. What I saw crushed all my hope completely. My whole body shivered with horrific agony. I didn't win. I was certain I would be the winner. It was destiny. It was fate. But no. The world continued to give me no justice or salvation whatsoever. I sank into one of the worst depressions of my life. For the next month, I barely left my room. I was completely and utterly at the end of all hope. My life is over, I thought. Without wealth, what is there to live for? I couldn't believe I didn't win. I kept thinking about the heavenly life I would be living if I had won. I was certain of victory. Instead, it turned into crushing defeat, just like everything else in my life. Everything I had tried to do in the past, ever since childhood, had been a failure. I spent all my time drifting aimlessly, doing nothing with my time, and brooding over my fate. I didn't want to think about anything. I could barely breathe from all of the stifling loneliness. All of my energy had been sapped out of me. And James officially ended the friendship between us. He hadn't contacted me since the Christmas party, and I felt extremely offended by this. For the first few months of 2012, I had tried contacting him, demanding to know why he had acted so cold and distant. I thought things would get better between us, but I was dead wrong. I got a hold of him by phone in February. He said a few words to me quickly before making an excuse to hang up. A month later, I messaged him on Facebook, and in April, I received a response from him, and he said he didn't want to be friends anymore. He didn't even tell me why. After he said those fateful words, he refused to ever talk to me again, and that was the last time I spoke to him. It was the ultimate betrayal. He was a big part of my life, and now he was gone, faded into a memory. I didn't have any friends left anymore. No friends in this entire world. I was completely alone, in the darkest pit of despair, and in that pit, I withered in agony. My hatred towards everyone, especially women, for depriving me of a happy life grew even stronger. I didn't want to resort to having to exact ultimate vengeance. I didn't want to die. I wanted something to live for. My mother and my sister came up to Santa Barbara for my 21st birthday. I didn't want them to come up, but they came anyway. I suppose my mother felt sorry for me, that I would be alone on my 21st birthday. And it's true, I would have been alone. Isn't it such a sad thing to contemplate? Being alone on my 21st birthday. Most other men have huge drinking parties with their friends and girlfriends to mark their passing over the legal age limit to drink alcohol. I've read stories online of how exciting other men's 21st birthdays are. I had absolutely no one to celebrate mine with. Having no friends, the only people who even wished me a happy birthday were my immediate family members. When my mother and sister arrived in Santa Barbara, they wanted to meet up at a restaurant in State Street, but that prospect horrified me. State Street was filled with young couples walking around arm in arm as they went on with their blissful dates. I was already tortured by the fact that I was now a 21-year-old virgin. So now, dreamers, Rodger is entering into his fall 2012 semester in college. And to be honest, it's actually mostly a repeat of his previous year in college. He continues to try to play the lottery, his dreams of becoming victorious and wealthy, and he tries to envision himself becoming worthy of beautiful girls. He continues to meditate, hoping that the laws of attraction will kick in. He was preparing to move out to his new apartment and get new roommates, as he and Spencer really grew to despise one another, because apparently Spencer had turned into quite the ladies' man. Even though Rodger doesn't think that his girlfriends are attractive, he's still jealous. After all, he'd never had a girl to his apartment the entire year in Isla Vista. Rodger continues to not win the lottery, which he feels is an injustice. He continues to fly off the handle into crying tantrums over these things. He's screamed for hours. He's drunk a whole bottle of wine. He spilled it on his laptop, and he's resorted to having to beg his mommy to buy him a new one, which she did. And Rodger actually put the money up for it, and she drove up there to reimburse him. And it was during this time, while he was waiting for his mom to come up and pay him back, she was going to take a couple hours to get there, he began to realize that the day of retribution was looming, and he decided to kill some time by going to a nearby shooting range. He rented a handgun and practiced. As I fired my first few rounds, I felt so sick to the stomach. I questioned my whole life, and I looked at the gun in front of me and asked myself, what am I doing here? How could things have led to this? I couldn't believe my life was turning out this way. There I was, practicing shooting with real guns because I had a plan to carry out a massacre. Why did things have to be this way? I silently questioned myself as I looked at the handgun I was holding in front of me. I paid my fee and left the range within a few minutes, feeling as if I was going to be sick. I spent the rest of the waiting period at the Coffee Bean in Oxnard, and I sat there by myself feeling absolutely disgusted. My whole world was twisted. To be honest, dreamers, I don't think Rodgers was so sick over the prospect of actually practicing firing the gun, of being there at the shooting range, and the possibility of his plans actually coming to fruition. I would say that he is most likely sick over the fact that he knows a part of his plan involves suicide. That's what's concerning him the most. After all, isn't it blatantly obvious by now that the only person Rodger cares for is himself? So, the new semester is about to start. He's going to get some new roommates, which he seemed okay with. And the school year started off basically the same as the rest of them. And as Halloween rolled around, he decided he was going to avoid all of the partying and debauchery and go home for the weekend. And it was at this point he continued to mull over the idea of a so-called day of retribution. I wanted to punish them all. I imagined how sweet it would be to slaughter all of those evil, slutty bitches who rejected me, along with all of the fraternity jocks they throw themselves at. To see them running from me in fear as I kill them left and right, that would be the ultimate retribution. Only then I would have all the power. They treated me like an insignificant little mouse, but on the day of retribution, I would be a god to them. They will be the mice, and I will be the predator. I considered setting the date for the day of retribution to be the next Halloween of 2013. That would give me a year to prepare, but I soon dismissed it. If the day of retribution were to happen, it would have to be on a normal weekend. There would be too many cops walking around during an event like Halloween, and cops are the only ones who could hinder my plans. Dreamers, at this point, Rodger is pretending to go to school. He isn't even taking any classes anymore. If his parents knew, they'd cut him off for sure, and he would have to end his life right then and there, so he thinks. He had gotten pretty good at lying to his parents. He did study, though. He was trying to learn how to, as he puts it, triumph over society by reading books about history, business, and philosophy at the library, also hiding the fact that he wasn't in classes from his roommates. He continued to play the lottery, and he began driving to Arizona to play the Powerball because it wasn't in California at the time. All the while driving there, he contemplated his dream woman that he would attract if he won. And he didn't win. He continued to be tormented by the sight of couples in love. He continued to feel dead inside. He continued to break down in tears, and he reached a breaking point. I called the only people I had in my life, my parents. I called both of them, first my mother, then my father, and I told them both how much I was suffering from my loneliness and my utter realization that I had no hope of ever having a happy life. I told them that they must be ashamed of me, that I was a 21-year-old virgin who was unable to get a girlfriend or make any friends whatsoever. I was not the son that any parent would want. My tantrum to my parents on the phone deeply disturbed them, and they arranged for me to see a psychiatrist, Dr. Charles Sophie, when I returned home for the winter break. So Rogers continued to feel the only way to rise above those who torment him was to destroy them, despite the fact that he began seeing a psychiatrist. And the day of retribution was becoming an even more real possibility for Roger, and he decided that he needed to get ready for it. I realized that I had to start planning and preparing for the day of retribution, even though I hadn't had any idea of what day it would be. My first act of preparation was to purchase my first handgun. I did this quickly and hastily at a local gun shop called Goleta Gun and Supply. I had already done some research on handguns, and I decided to purchase a Glock 34 semi-automatic pistol, an efficient and highly accurate weapon. I signed all the papers and was told that my pickup day was in mid-December. When I brought it back to my room, I felt a new sense of power. I was now armed. Who was the alpha male now, bitches? I thought to myself, regarding all of the girls who looked down on me in the past. I quickly admired my new weapon before I locked it up in a safe and prepared to go back to my hometown for the winter break. My life was moving in a vicious circle of torment with no way out. The only thing that got me through it was my hope that there was a way out, and that hope had been shattered too many times. I couldn't live like this anymore. I knew that if things continued to be the same, I would have to carry out my ultimate retribution and die in the process. I didn't want to die. I feared death. But death is better than living such a miserable, insignificant life. Okay, so after winter break, Roger went back to Isla Vista and signed up for the spring 2013 classes, but he only took online classes just to placate his parents. He had no interest in going to college anymore. He was still being tormented by all of the beautiful girls around him. Everyone was enjoying the college experience except for him, and his hatred continued to fester. He drove to Arizona to keep playing the Powerball, but he still didn't win. He never stopped trying because he felt like he was supposed to win, and he really wanted something to live for. At least that's what he says. He knew that if he stopped playing the lottery, if he lost hope, his life was over. And luckily for him, by April of that year, Powerball came to California, so it was a little bit easier. But his day of retribution was still at the forefront of his thoughts. During the spring of 2013, I began to seriously think about planning the day of retribution. My next step towards planning it was to buy my second handgun, a Sig Sauer P226. It is of a much higher quality than the Glock and a lot more efficient. In turn, it was a lot more expensive. My Glock 34 was around $700, whereas my Sig Sauer was $1,100. These prices were of no concern to me, however. When I first moved to Santa Barbara and experienced all of those horrible revelations about the nature of humanity, I knew that something like the Day of Retribution could very well happen if the world continued to mistreat me. I began to carefully save up all the money that my parents and grandmothers kept sending me. It was an ample amount to live on, leaving me with a lot left over to build up in my bank account. When I hit the $5,000 mark, which was soon after my move to Santa Barbara, I decided to never go under it deeming that $5,000 was enough to buy all of the supplies and equipment that I would need if I had to do something like this. The day of retribution has always been in the back of my mind as a final solution if all else failed in my life. And as it so happened, all else did indeed fail. In Santa Barbara, I spent most of my time in my room brooding. The world is so twisted, and I wanted answers. I hated all those obnoxious, boisterous men who were able to enjoy pleasurable lives with beautiful girls. But I hated the girls even more, because they were the ones who chose those men instead of me. It was their choice. They were the ones who deprived me of love and sex. My hatred and rage towards all women festered inside of me like the plague. Their very existence is the cause of all my torture, pain, and suffering throughout my entire life. I desire them so intensely, but I could never have them. I could never have the experience of holding hands with a beautiful girl and walking on a moonlit beach. I could never embrace a girlfriend and feel her warmth and love. I could never have passionate sex with a girl and drift off to sleep with her body beside mine. Women deem me unworthy of having them, and so they deprived me of an enjoyable youth while giving their love and sex to other boys. In all those years, I suffered a life of sexual starvation and unfulfilled desires. I will never get those years back. My life has been wasted, all because women hate me so much. All I had ever wanted was to love a woman, but their behavior has only earned my hatred. I want to have sex with them and make them feel good, but they would be disgusted at the prospect. They have no sexual attraction towards me. It's such an injustice, and I vehemently question why things had to be this way. Why do women behave like vicious, stupid, cruel animals who take delight in my suffering and starvation? Why do they have a perverted sexual attraction for the most brutish of men instead of gentlemen of intelligence? I've concluded that women are flawed. There is something mentally wrong with the way that their brains are wired, as if they haven't evolved from animal-like thinking. They are incapable of reason or thinking rationally. They are like animals, completely controlled by their primal depraved emotions and impulses. That is why they are attracted to wild, barbaric, beast-like men. They are beasts themselves. Beasts should not have any rights in a civilized society. If their wickedness is not contained, the whole of humanity will be held back from advancement to a more civilized state. Women should not have the right to choose who to mate with. That choice should be made for them by civilized men of intelligence. If women had the freedom to choose which men to mate with, like they do today, they would breed with stupid, degenerate men, which would only produce stupid, degenerate offspring. This in turn would hinder the advancement of humanity. Not only hinder it, but devolve humanity completely. Women are like the plague that must be quarantined. When I came to this brilliant, perfect revelation, I felt like everything was now clear to me in a bitter, twisted way. I am one of the few people in this world who has the intelligence to see this. I am like a god, and my purpose is to exact ultimate retribution on all of the impurities I see in this world. The spring of 2013 was when I came across the website puahate.com. It's a forum full of men who are starved of sex just like me. Many of them have their own theories of what women are attracted to, and many of them share my hatred of women, though unlike me, would be too cowardly to act on it. Reading the post on the website only confirmed many of the theories I had about how wicked and degenerate women really are. Most of the people on that website have extremely stupid opinions that I found very frustrating, but I found a few to be quite insightful. The website is very depressing. It shows just how bleak and cruel the world is due to the evilness of women. I tried to show it to my parents, to give them a dose of reality of why I'm so miserable. They never understood why I'm so miserable. They always had the delusion that everything was going well for me, especially my father. I sent the link to that website to my parents, and neither one of them bothered to look at the post on there. Okay, so at this point, as for Rodger's parents, I'm thinking that they just aren't listening to their son intently enough. Of course, hindsight is 20/20, but what are we making of the parents here? To me, they seem kind of wrapped up in their own lives still. Him sending them the link to that website was sort of a big, huge red flag waving right in front of their face, but they didn't even look. They didn't even look. And it feels like what Rodger said about them sending him to Santa Barbara was true. That they would pay anything to not have to deal with him. Could they have known how volatile he was becoming? Maybe not, but I don't think that they were looking at anything going on in their son's life to begin with, especially after he moved an hour or so north of where they lived. Spring passed, and Rodger was dreadfully looking towards the summer. The scantily clad women all around town, intensifying his hatred even more. He did what he could to avoid seeing them by spending time alone at Lake Park in Goleta, California. Rodger was reaching 2 years in Santa Barbara, and he was still in the same dark, lonely place he'd always found himself. Just now, he was angrier than he'd ever been. The more I thought about all of these injustices that were dealt to me, the more eager I became for revenge. It's all I had left. Again, I didn't want to die, but I knew I had to kill myself after I exacted my revenge to avoid getting captured and imprisoned. For a while, I had been deciding on whether I would exact my retribution in Isla Vista or at Santa Barbara City College. In both places, I had suffered greatly at the hands of everyone there. I had seen attractive young couples walking around in both places, and those were my targets. I wanted to kill as many attractive young couples as I possibly could. After a lot of thinking, I concluded that the day of retribution would take place in Isla Vista. On weekend nights, the streets are always flooded with young couples, good-looking popular kids walking to their parties. What better place is there to exact my retribution on my enemies? Every time I walked around Isla Vista, trying to meet girls or to fit in with popular kids, I've only been treated with disdain, as if I'm inferior. On the day of retribution, the tables will indeed turn, I mused to myself. I will be a god, and they will all be animals that I can slaughter. They are animals. They behave like animals, and I will slaughter them like the animals that they are. I came to the point where I had to set a date for the day of retribution. It would have to be on a normal party weekend. So I set it for some time during November of 2013. This would give me 5 months to plan and prepare. 5 more months of life. But then again, I wouldn't even call it life. The existence I had in this world during the last 8 years is anything but life. A feeling of overwhelming dizziness and anxiety swept over me. I was going to die. I couldn't believe it. Then I realized that my life was over anyway. I wasn't going to lose my virginity. I was never going to experience love and sex. I was never going to have children. This final act of retribution is the only thing I could do. It was very hard to come to terms with this fact. I felt very trapped and lost. I hated the feeling of being trapped and lost. I wanted a way out, but I saw none. If only one pretty girl had shown me some form of attraction, the day of retribution would never happen. I never even considered it. The day of retribution is mainly my war against women for rejecting me and depriving me of sex and love. If only one girl had given me the chance, tried to get to know me, let me take her out on a date, none of this would have happened. It was so hard to accept that things would have to resort to me having to perform this act of retribution that I was planning. I decided that since my plans for the day of retribution wouldn't be taking place until November, I could use the time that I had during the summer to give life another chance. One last chance before the end. One last-ditch effort to attain happiness. So at this point in the manifesto, Rodger went on and on about his resentment towards his mom, choosing to stay single instead of marrying a wealthy man and moving into a mansion. It's very self-centered and very cringy. I still continued to pester my mom to do this, and she still stubbornly refused. I will always resent my mother for refusing to do this. If not for her sake, she should have done it for mine. Joining a family of great wealth would have truly saved my life. I would have a high enough status to attract beautiful girlfriends and live above all of my enemies. All of my horrific troubles would have been eased instantly. It was very selfish of my mother to not consider this. So during that summer of 2013, Rodger did go see the counselor that his parents found him. But to him, it seemed more like a paid friend. He would end up just finding himself envious of their personal lives and their girlfriends. Especially again with Rodger's view of them being beneath him because of their race or their looks. It just infuriated Rodger even more to hang out with these social skills counselors. But the next counselor he got was different. The second counselor that was assigned to help me was a girl named Sasha. She was only a year older than me. Sasha was the first young girl I had interacted with the entire time I stayed in Santa Barbara, and she was only hired to talk to me. How pathetic is that? At first, I didn't want a female counselor, but when I was introduced to her, I saw that she was quite a pretty-looking blonde. I couldn't refuse the opportunity to hang out with a blonde girl, even though she was a hired friend. It was the only time in my life that I had the experience of spending time with a girl my age, and even though it was all fake, I really enjoyed it. I felt much better about life after each time we met. But then I thought about how unfair it was that I could only get a fake little taste of such an experience, while other men got to do such a thing every single day with their girlfriends. Eventually, Sasha had to move out of Santa Barbara, and I decided not to have any more female counselors. It has the same effect as hiring a prostitute, I imagine. It temporarily feels good for the moment, but afterwards, it makes one feel like a pathetic loser for having to hire a girl when other men get to have the experience for free. In July, I spent a lot of time exercising in my room in a final effort to appear as attractive to girls as possible. I proposed that after 2 weeks of rigorous exercising, I would try my hardest to go out in Isla Vista and do everything I could to meet a girl and lose my virginity. It had been a long time since I went out to Isla Vista by myself, but I knew that I had to do it. I had nothing to lose. My whole life was on the line. Before I would set the definite decision to plan the day of retribution, I wanted to give women and humanity one more chance to accept me and give me a chance to have a pleasurable youth. I resolved that if I go out to Isla Vista for this final time, and I still end up going back to my room as a lonely virgin, I will have no choice but to plan my retribution. I even attended college at SBCC again. I signed up for a summer sociology class and attended it for a week, before dropping it out of the familiar frustration of girls talking to other boys instead of me. This last-ditch effort of desperation to once again try to live an enjoyable life in Isla Vista came to an ultimate and devastating culmination on Saturday night, July 20th, just a few days before my 22nd birthday. It was the day that I decided to go out in Isla Vista in an attempt to lose my virginity before I turned 22. That was the only thing that could have saved me. I was giving the female gender one last chance to provide me with the pleasures I deserved from them. I was too nervous to go out there sober, so I bought a bottle of vodka and took a few shots to garner enough courage to walk out at such an hour. I had taken one too many, for by the time I reached Del Playa Street, my head was clouded with drunkenness. At the start, it benefited me greatly. I saw lots of good-looking popular kids socializing in groups all over the place, and if I wasn't drunk, it would have intimidated me too much. I was so drunk that I walked into a wild house party that was taking place on Del Playa. There were about 100 people at the party, and everyone was socializing with groups of friends, except for me. I walked around in my drunken confidence for a few moments, helped myself to the beer that they had, and tried to act like a normal party-goer. I soon became frustrated that no one was paying any attention to me, particularly the girls. I saw girls talking to other guys who looked like obnoxious slobs, but none of them showed any interest in me. As my frustration grew, so did my anger. I came across this Asian guy who was talking to a white girl. The sight of that filled me with rage. I always felt as if white girls thought less of me because I was half Asian. But then I see this white girl at this party talking to a full-blooded Asian. I had never had that kind of attention from a white girl. And white girls are the only girls I'm attracted to, especially the blondes. How could an ugly Asian attract the attention of a white girl, while a beautiful Eurasian like myself never had any attention from them? I glared at them for a bit, and then I decided I had been insulted enough. I angrily walked towards them and bumped the Asian guy aside and tried to act cocky and arrogant to both the boy and the girl. My drunken state got the better of me, and I almost fell over on the floor after a few minutes of this. They said something along the lines that I was very drunk and I needed to get some water. So I angrily left them and went out to the front yard, where the main partying was happening. Rage fumed inside me, and I realized I just walked away from that confrontation, so I rushed back into the house and spitefully insulted the Asian before walking outside again. I stood awkwardly in the front yard for a bit, realizing how pathetic I looked all by myself when everyone was partying around me. To calm down, I climbed up onto a wooden ledge that bordered the street and plunged down on one of the chairs there. Isla Vista was at its wildest state at that time, and I saw lots of guys walking around with hot blonde girls on their arm. It fueled me with rage, as it always had. I should be one of those guys, but no blonde girls gave me that chance. I looked down at all of them, and in my drunken carelessness, I extended my arm to pretend to shoot at all of them, laughing giddily as I did it. Eventually, some partiers climbed up onto the ledge. They were all obnoxious, rowdy boys whom I've always despised. A couple of pretty girls came up and talked to them, but not to me. And they all started socializing right next to me, and none of the girls paid attention to me. I rose from my chair and tried to act arrogant and cocky towards them, throwing insults at everyone. They only laughed at me and started insulting me back. That was the last straw. I had taken enough insults that night. A dark, hate-fueled rage overcame my entire being, and I tried to push as many of them as I could off the 10-foot ledge. My main target was the girls. I wanted to punish them for talking to the obnoxious boys instead of me. It was one of the most foolish and rash things I'd ever did, and I almost risked everything doing it. But I was so drunk with rage that I didn't care. I failed to push any of them off from that ledge, and the boys started pushing me, which resulted in me being the one to fall onto the street. And when I landed, I felt a snap in my ankle, followed by a stinging pain. I slowly got up and found that I couldn't even walk. I had to stumble and stumble I did. I tried to get away from there as fast as I could. As I stumbled a few yards down Del Playa with my shattered leg, I realized that someone had stolen my Gucci sunglasses that my mother had given me. I loved those sunglasses and I had to get them back. I vehemently turned around and staggered back towards that party. At that point, I was so drunk that I forgot where the party was and ended up walking onto the front yard of the house next to it, demanding to know who took my glasses. The people in this house must have been friends with the ones I previously fought with, for they greeted me with vicious hostility. They called me derogatory names, typical things those types of scumbags would say. A whole group of obnoxious brutes came up and dragged me onto their driveway, pushing and hitting me. I wanted to fight and kill them all. I managed to throw one punch toward the main attacker, but that only caused them to beat me even more. I fell to the ground where they started kicking me and punching me in the face. Eventually, some other people from the street broke up the fight. I managed to have the strength to stand up and stagger away. It was the first time in my life I had been truly beaten up physically to the point where my face was bruised. I had suffered a lot of bullying in my life, but most of it wasn't physical. I had never been beaten and humiliated that badly. Everyone in Isla Vista saw what happened, and it was truly horrific. The worst part of this ordeal was not getting beat up on, oh no. It was the fact that no one showed any concern. There was only one group who helped me at the end of Del Playa, but after that they abandoned me. Not one girl offered to help me as I stumbled home with one broken leg, beaten and bloodied. If girls had been attracted to me, they would have offered to walk me to my room and taken care of me. They would have even offered to sleep with me to make me feel better. But no, not one girl showed an ounce of concern with me. They didn't care. No one cared about me. I was all alone. As I got to my room, I was so traumatized that I called the only people in the world that I knew, my parents and my sister. Yes, I even called my sister, someone I never got along with. I sulked for a long time. And then I reached up to my neck to feel my special golden necklace, and I felt nothing there. In the midst of the fight, one of those horrible punks had snatched off my special golden necklace that my grandma Amma had given me. That necklace was one of the most special items I had, and now one of those evil, wretched thugs will be selling it to buy drugs. I broke down in anguish, and I wailed in agony, crying and crying until I passed out in my bed all alone. When I woke up the next morning, my leg was in absolute agony. It was purple and swollen. I couldn't even stumble anymore. I had to crawl. Being fully sober, all my anxiety came back. It became very clear to me what had happened. I felt enraged by everything, but also fearful that I might get in trouble. I did try to push girls off a ledge and threaten to kill all of those people, which could implicate me. I had to concoct an altered story to explain to the police, who would inevitably have to interview me once I got to the hospital and reported my injury. My father drove up to Santa Barbara to bring me to the hospital. 2 police did interview me, and I told them that those boys deliberately pushed me off the ledge after I acted cocky towards them. I didn't mention the girls at all. I expressed to the police of my wishes that they should all be punished for this. The police then went to interview them, and they had their own version of the story. Since there was no actual evidence, the whole case was shortly dismissed. The physician at the hospital put me in a temporary cast and gave me crutches. On top of all the other things in the world that made me feel inferior, now I was a cripple. I felt so defeated and broken. And to my horror, the physician said that I would have to be in crutches for the next 6 weeks and that I might need to get surgery. The leg that was broken was my left, so I was still able to drive. Shortly after the incident, I drove home and spent the rest of the summer recovering. It was a depressing drive. I had never felt so defeated and wronged in my life. I had actually gone out to a party in Isla Vista, hoping that I would be walking back to my room in triumph with a beautiful girl on my arm. But instead, I stumbled back to my room with a shattered leg and shattered hopes. So now, dreamers, Roger spent his 22nd birthday at his mom's house with his broken leg, feeling more self-pity than ever. His mother bought him a replacement gold necklace, and that's basically how Elliot Rodger ushered in his 22nd and final year. The highly unjust experience of being beaten and humiliated in front of everyone in Isla Vista and their subsequent lack of concern for my well-being was the last and final straw. I actually gave them all one last chance to accept me, to give me a reason not to hate them, and they devastatingly blew it back in my face. I gave the world too many chances. It was time for retribution. I went into surgery in the beginning of August. After visiting the local orthopedist, he recommended that I have my broken ankle surgically screwed in place instead of waiting for it to heal by itself. I decided to go through with it, just so I could be out of crutches sooner. My mother drove me to the hospital early in the morning, and I was wrought with fear. I had never been through such a thing in my life. They put me to sleep with anesthesia, and when I woke up, my leg burned with pain. Though the pain medication they injected in me afterward helped ease this. A new cast was placed on my leg. I didn't even want to think about what it looked like underneath. I was told that they screwed in a titanium plate to hold the fractured bone in place, and it required 6 screws. I rested in the hospital for a few hours before I was allowed to go home, under the instructions that I would have to keep my leg raised at all times for the next week. All of the suffering, loneliness, rejection, and humiliation I had experienced since then had strengthened me. The hatred that festered inside me all of those years leading up to this point had empowered me in a dark, twisted way. I was now armed with weapons, possessed great intelligence and philosophical insight, with the willpower to exact the most catastrophic act of vengeance the world would ever see. I was brooding about the injustices of life and my place in the world. It fully dawned on me that I would now have to bring about the day of retribution. There was no other hope. I mused that once I descended upon Isla Vista, armed with my weapons and my burning hatred, I would definitely make sure to target the people who lived in that house that I was attacked in. The plan was to destroy the entirety of Isla Vista and kill every single person in it, or at least kill as many popular young people I could before the police arrived, and then I'd have to kill myself. I felt so shocked and overwhelmed upon realizing that it was going to have to resort to this. I was going to die soon, and that was hard to accept. I didn't want to die, but I would have no choice. Vengeance is the only path. All other paths have been closed shut. I thought it was such a tragedy that I was actually going to wage war against women and all of humanity. But then again, women's rejection of me was a declaration of war. They insulted me by deeming me inferior of their love and sex. They hate me, and I will return that hatred 1,000-fold. I will inflict suffering on everyone in Isla Vista, just like they have made me suffer. In the past, I've always been at their mercy, and I was given none. On the day of retribution, everyone will be at my mercy, and in turn, I will show them no mercy at all. My retribution will be so devastating that it will shake the very foundations of the world. My broken leg was a setback, of course. Even with surgery, I'd have to be in crutches for 6 weeks. And even after that, it would take a while for me to be able to walk normally again. I figured I won't be walking around normally until October. There was no way I'd be well enough to prepare for the day of retribution by November. There was too little time. I made a new plan to set the ultimate and final date for the day of retribution to be at the end of spring 2014. This would give me plenty of time to prepare. The day of retribution was now my whole reason for living. It's all I have to live for. This act of deadly vengeance against the people who have wronged me is my sole purpose in this world. I needed as much time as possible in order to plan it efficiently. Postponing the day of retribution also gave me a few more months of life. I stayed at my mom's house until my leg healed enough for me to lose those crutches. I did not want to go back to Santa Barbara while still in crutches. It would be too humiliating. And I had felt humiliated enough there already. So Rodger's mom and dad took him back to see a psychologist, one of several that they tried to see with their son. But what ended up happening was, instead of listening to what Rodger was telling him about his struggles, the psychologist ended their session by prescribing him risperidone. But Rodger researched it and decided that it would be all wrong for him. He also briefly reconnected with Maddie, his first childhood friend, but she too grew into the epitome of everything that he hated in women, and she was graduating from USC, and she was just another one of his long and growing list of enemies. And soon it came time to go back to Isla Vista, and his roommates had moved out in the time that he was gone, and new ones were on their way. Rodger was entering into the fall of 2013. He had signed up for a couple of online classes, and he was still using a walking cast on his left leg, and he would not leave his apartment until it was off. It was also at this point that, in addition to using his firearms, Rodger had contemplated that he would run people down with his car. Every time he was in Southern California, driving around in his dad's Mercedes, if he saw any couples in love walking down the sidewalk, he had the urge to crash into them with his car. On one of his last visits to his dad's house, he recalled a fight that he had with his stepmother. I had an argument with Sumaya while I was visiting Father's house. It started when she began to boast that my brother Jazz was recently signed by a TV agent to act in television commercials. She said that by the time he's my age, he will be a successful actor. Jazz was already socially savvy for his age, and I've always envied him for it. Sumaya told me that he would never have problems with girls and he would lose his virginity while he is young. I had to sit there and listen to the bitch tell me that my little brother will grow up enjoying the life I've always craved for, but missed out on. It's very unfair how some boys are able to live such pleasurable lives, while I've never had a taste of it. And now it has been confirmed to me that my little brother will become one of them. He will become a popular kid who gets all the girls. Girls will love him, and he will become one of my enemies. That was the day that I decided I would have to kill him on the day of retribution as well. I will not allow the boy to surpass me at everything. to live the life I've always wanted. It's not fair that he has had the chance to have a pleasurable life while I've been denied it. It will be a hard thing to do, because I had really bonded with my little brother in the last year, and he had respected and looked up to me, but I would have to do it. If I can't live a pleasurable life, then neither will he. I will not let him put my legacy to shame. In order to kill Jazz, I would have to kill Samoya too, but that will be easy. All I would have to do is think about all the hurtful things that she has said to me in the past as I plunge my knife into her neck. But what if Father is in the house to stop me? Would I have to kill him too? That would be too much. I remember when I was a child, I had dreams about my father dying, and I woke up crying to my mother, in which she would comfort me and tell me that it was just a dream. How could my life have resorted to the point where I am the one to kill my very own father? I felt sick to my stomach. I concluded that I would have to set the day of retribution during a time when my father is out of the country, on one of his business trips. It would be too risky to try and kill him. I might hesitate at the last second. When I thought about all of this, I truly did feel sick. I felt a shiver run through me. My whole world had become so twisted and wrong. I didn't want it to come to this. I desperately wanted a way out. To make me feel more confident, my mother provided me with a better car to drive while in Santa Barbara, a BMW 3 Series coupe. I had always wanted this, since I cared a lot about my appearance. I had been asking my parents for a more upper-class car ever since I found out that there was a car hierarchy, and that some students at my college drove better cars than others. Now I was one of the students with the better high-class car. Having a nicer car than most students my age did indeed make me feel more confident. My mother should have bought me this car when I first moved to Santa Barbara. It made me feel better about going out more while I was there. This, coupled with my newly healed leg, gave me one last twinge of hope as the remaining months of 2013 passed. My 2 new housemates moved into the apartment for the autumn semester. They were 2 foreign Asian students who attended UCSB. They were the biggest nerds I'd ever seen, and they were both very ugly with annoying voices. My last 2 housemates, Chris and John, were nerds as well, but at least they were friendly and pleasant. These 2 new ones were utterly repulsive, and one of them had a very rebellious demeanor about him. He went out of his way to start arguments with me whenever I raised the issue of all the noise he made. Hell, even living with Spencer was more pleasant than these 2 idiots. I knew that when the day of retribution came, I would have to kill my housemates to get them out of the way. If they were pleasant to live with, I would regret having to kill them. But due to their behavior, I now had no regrets about such a prospect. In fact, I'd enjoy stabbing them both to death while they slept. To my extreme rage, I discovered that my sister now had a boyfriend and that she had lost her virginity. She had casually dated boys in the past, but never to the serious extent that she did with this one. And this one was half white, half Mexican, named Samuel, and I immediately took an intense disliking to him when I was first introduced to him. He seemed like the typical obnoxious slob that most young girls are sexually attracted to. Georgia invited him to my mother's house all the time, and it angered me to watch him lurking about, eating my mother's food and drinks, and making use of my mother's house. He was freeloading off my mother, and she didn't even realize it. I eventually grew to hate him after hearing him having sex with my sister. I arrived at the house one day, my mother being at work and heard Samuel plunging his penis into my sister's vagina through her closed room door, along with my sister's moans. I just stood there and listened to it all. So my sister, who was 4 years younger than me, managed to lose her virginity before I did. It reminded me of how pathetic I was. At the age of 22, I was still a virgin. I hated her boyfriend as well. My sister said that he'd been with other girls before her, and I'm sure he lost his virginity at a much younger age. It's such an injustice. The slob doesn't even have a car, and yet he's able to get girlfriends, while I drive a BMW and get no attention from girls whatsoever. My sister even showed me a picture of one of his ex-girlfriends, a brunette white girl. My hatred towards him only intensified after that. I refused to speak to him whenever he came over, and I constantly pestered my mother to ban him from the house, but she refused to heed my demands. Even worse, she constantly talked about him admiringly. An enemy now infiltrated the household of my mother, the one place in the world where I've always sought refuge from injustice. So dreamers, the fall semester is flying by. Halloween, the day Rodger had initially considered his day of retribution, came and went, and he went home again for that holiday. He visited with a different psychologist, but nothing really changed or helped. And he spent the last months of 2013 driving around Santa Barbara in his BMW, trying to attract the attention of girls. And still nothing. During the winter break, I was able to experience one final respite before 2014 came. The year my sad story will come to its tragic end. My mother and sister planned a trip to England at the end of December, this time for 2 weeks. For those 2 weeks, I stayed at my mother's house by myself, taking advantage of the time to have one last period of relaxation and peace. They decided to take my sister's boyfriend, Samuel, to England with them. And upon hearing this, I became very infuriated. Samuel was my enemy, someone who has enjoyed a happy life while I have starved for years. And now my own mother was paying for his ticket to England, something he does not deserve. I felt so betrayed by my mother because of this. She should have been more considerate about how I'd feel. I am her son. She should be on my side. But then again, my mother is a woman, and women are all mentally ill. There is no way she could possibly understand my point of view. I attended my father's Christmas party during this winter break. I felt very bitter and ashamed having to appear to all of my father's friends as the same awkward, unwanted outcast I'd always been. Some of them asked me about my life in Santa Barbara, and a few even asked if I had a girlfriend. I had to suffer having to tell them no, I don't have a girlfriend because girls are not attracted to me. I wished I could tell them all I had an amazing life there, with a girlfriend who would be with me at that very party. I wish I could have made them all proud of me, but of course, I had nothing about me to be proud of. The only solace I had for that shame was the knowledge that I would soon rectify everything on the day of retribution. My mother told me that I could have one bottle of wine from her pantry while she was away, and on New Year's Eve I chose to open the best one in the lot, a fine vintage that I slowly sipped throughout the night as I sat at my mother's house, all alone. I knew that other young people were having the time of their lives that night, partying the night away. As I sipped my wine alone, in the moonlit darkness of my mother's backyard, I assured myself that I would have my revenge on all of those young people very soon. After a restless sleep, I rose from my bed early on New Year's Day of 2014. This was the final year. This was a year in which everything would come to a close. In this year, I will finally have my closure, my vengeance, my retribution. My whole tragic life has led to this, and I was ready. I had been rejected, insulted, humiliated, cast out, bullied, starved, tortured, and ridiculed for far too long. Humanity is a cruel and brutal species, and the only thing I could do to even the score was to return that cruelty 1,000-fold. Women's rejection of me is a declaration of war, and if it is war they want, then war they shall have. It will be a war that will result in their complete and utter annihilation. I will deliver a blow to my enemies that will be so catastrophic, it will redefine the very essence of human nature. It was time to plot exactly what I will do on the day of retribution. I will be a god, punishing women and all of humanity for their depravity. I will finally deliver to them all the pain and suffering that they've dealt to me for so long. The first thing I had to consider was the exact date it will take place. Valentine's Day would be very fitting, since it was a holiday that made me feel the most miserable and insulted. The holiday in which young couples celebrated their happy lives together. The problem was that Valentine's Day was only a month away and I needed more time than that. Also on Valentine's Day, most young couples will be spread out in various restaurants in the city instead of being packed together in the parties in Isla Vista. Another option was Deltopia, a day in which many young people pour in from all over the state to have spring break on Del Playa Street. I figured this would be the perfect day to attack Isla Vista, but after watching YouTube videos of previous Deltopia parties, I saw that there were way too many cops walking around on such an event. It would be impossible to kill enough of my enemies before being dispatched by those damnable cops. I wanted to set an exact date, on a normal Isla Vista party weekend, and once I set that date, I would never change it. After a lot of thinking and consideration, I concluded to bring about the day of retribution on Saturday, April 26, 2014. In the first months of 2014, which are the last months of my life, I tried to make the most out of every day. There was not a single day where I stayed in my room. Every morning, I set out in my BMW to go on adventures around the vicinity of Santa Barbara and Montecito, and I wouldn't return until late into the night. I went on hikes in the mountains of Montecito, wandering around aimlessly in beautiful parks, took strolls along the beach, sipped lattes at various cafes, and watched the sunset at my many contemplation spots, staying there until the stars lit up the night sky. Every time I did this, though, there was no escaping the sight of young couples doing the exact same thing together. It made me even more eager for the day of retribution to come. My life was a living hell, and that hell needed to come to an end. I had enough extra money saved to live comfortably and indulgently before I die. I didn't spend all of it, though, for I still needed supplies that were vital to my plans. First, I needed to buy a third handgun, just in case one of them jams. I needed 2 working handguns at the same time, as that was how I planned to commit suicide, with 2 simultaneous shots to the head. I also needed to buy magazine clips and ammunition, as well as knives and carrying cases for my equipment. Even in the first months of 2014, leading up to the tragic day in April, the little twinge of hope inside me never faded. It remained as if it were a tiny, flickering flame of a candle in a dark room. I suppose that little flame is what prompted me to attend the 2 spring semester classes I had registered for at SBCC. That lasted a good 2 weeks before I realized how pointless it was and dropped them. There was no hope now, and I had to accept it. After going through every single fantasy I had about how I would punish my enemies, I started to detail all of my exact plans for the day of retribution and how it would play out. On the day before the day of retribution, I will start the first phase of my vengeance, silently killing as many people as I can around Isla Vista by luring them into my apartment through some sort of trickery. The first people I would have to kill are my 2 housemates to secure the entire apartment for myself as my personal torture and killing chamber. After that, I will start luring people to my apartment, knock them out with a hammer, and slit their throats. I will torture some of the good-looking people before I kill them, assuming that the good-looking ones had the best sex lives. All that pleasure they had in life, I will punish by bringing them pain and suffering. I have lived a life of pain and suffering, and it was time to bring that pain to people who deserved it. I will cut them, flay them, strip all the skin off their flesh, and pour boiling water all over them while they are still alive, as well as any other form of torture I could possibly think of. When they are dead, I will behead them and keep their heads in a bag, for their heads will play a major role in the final phase. The first phase will represent my vengeance against all of the men who have had pleasurable sex lives while I've had to suffer. Things will be fair once I make them suffer as I did. I will finally even the score. The second phase will take place on the day of retribution itself, just before the climactic massacre. The second phase will represent my war on women. I will punish all females for the crime of depriving me of sex. They have starved me of sex for my entire youth and gave that pleasure to other men. In doing so, they took many years of my life away. I cannot kill every single female on earth, but I can deliver a devastating blow that will shake them all to the core of their wicked hearts. I will attack the very girls who represent everything that I hate in the female gender, the hottest sorority of UCSB. After doing a lot of extensive research within the last year, I found out that the sorority with the most beautiful girls is Alpha Phi. I know exactly where their house is. I've sat outside it in my car stalking them many times. The Alpha Phi sorority is full of hot, beautiful blonde girls. The kinds of girls I've always desired but was never able to have because they all look down on me. They are all spoiled, heartless, wicked bitches. They think they are superior to me. And if I've ever tried to ask one on a date, they would reject me. I will sneak into their house around 9 p.m. on the day of retribution, just before all of the partying starts, and slaughter every single one of them with my guns and knives. If I have time, I will set their whole house on fire. Then we shall see who the superior one really is. The final phase of the day of retribution will be my ultimate showdown on the streets of Isla Vista. On the morning before, I will drive down to my father's house and kill my little brother, denying him the chance to grow up and surpass me, along with my stepmother, Samoya, as she will be in the way. My father will be away on one of his business trips, so thankfully I won't have to deal with him. If he didn't go away on that trip, I might even have to postpone the whole plan because of my fear that I might hesitate if I have to kill him. Once I have taken care of my brother and my stepmother, I will switch over to the Mercedes SUV and drive it back to Isla Vista. I will use it as one of my killing machines against my enemies. An SUV will cause a lot more damage than my BMW coupe. After I've killed all the sorority girls at the Alpha Phi house, I will quickly get into the SUV before police arrive, assuming that they would arrive within 3 minutes. I will then make my way to Del Playa splattering as many of my enemies as I can with the SUV, and shooting anyone I don't splatter. I can only imagine how sweet it will be to ram the SUV into all those groups of popular young people who I've always witnessed walking right in the middle of the road as if they are better than everyone else. When they are writhing in pain, their bodies broken and dying after I splatter them, they will fully realize their crimes. Once I reach Del Playa Street, I will dump the bag of severed heads I've saved for my previous victims, proclaiming to everyone how much I made them all suffer. And once they see all of their friends' heads rolling into the street, everyone will fear me as the powerful God that I am. I will then start massacring everyone on Del Playa Street. I will pull up next to a house party and fire bullets at everyone partying on the front yard. I will specifically target the good-looking people and all of the couples. After I've destroyed the house party, I will continue down Del Playa, destroying everything and everyone. When I see the first police car come to their rescue, I will drive away as fast as I can, shooting and ramming everyone in my path until I find a suitable place to finally end my life. To end my life, I will quickly swallow all of the Xanax and Vicodin pills I have left, along with an ample amount of hard liquor. Immediately after imbibing this mixture, I will shoot myself in the head with 2 of my handguns simultaneously. If the gunshots don't kill me, the deadly drug mixture will eventually. I will not suffer being captured and sent to prison. I must plan this very efficiently. Nothing can go wrong. It needs to be perfect. This is now my sole purpose in this world. My plans will come to fruition, and I mustn't let anyone stop me. On the week leading up to the date I set for the day of retribution, I uploaded several videos on YouTube in order to express my views and feelings to the world, though I don't plan on uploading my ultimate video until minutes before the attack, because on that video I will talk about exactly what I'm doing. I titled one of the videos I upload, "Why Do Girls Hate Me So Much?" in which I asked the entire population of women the question I've wanted to ask them for so many years. Why do they hate me so much? Why have they never fancied me? Why do they give their love and sex to other men but not me, even though I deserve them more? In the video, I show that I am the perfect, magnificent gentleman, worthy of having a beautiful girlfriend, making the world see how unreasonable it is that I've had to struggle my life to get a girlfriend. It is my attempt to reason with the female gender, to ask them why they've mistreated me. I was hoping I would get some sort of answer from girls. In fact, a small part of me was even hoping that a girl would see the video and contact me and give me a chance to go on a date. That alone would have prevented the day of retribution, if one girl had just given me a chance. But no. As expected, I got absolutely no response from girls. The only responses I got were from other men who called me names and made fun of me. Women don't care about me at all. They won't even tell me why they've mistreated me. This just goes to show how evil and sadistic they are. Oh well. They will realize the gravity of their crimes when I slaughter them on the day of retribution. How dare they reject a magnificent gentleman like me? As April 26th drew even closer, I prepared myself to the fullest extent. All I had left to do was finish writing this story and film my final video. But then on Thursday, April 24th, I woke up with a terrible cold. And I rarely ever get colds. I've always had a strong immune system. It was as if fate itself was trying to stop me from doing it. But what other reason do I have for living? Alas, there was no way I could carry out my plans if I had a cold. Everything had to be perfect. In addition, I found out that my father had arrived home 2 days earlier than he originally said he would. So if I indeed went forth with my plans, I would have to kill my father, which I wouldn't be mentally prepared for. I hastily decided to postpone it to Saturday, May 24th, 2014. I would definitely be fully recovered from my cold by then. This would also give me a few more weeks of life and more time to prepare. A few days earlier, I felt so ready to finally strike back at women and humanity with all my rage and hatred. I was profoundly eager to do it, but for some strange reason, having a few more weeks of life made me feel relieved. I took in a deep breath and relaxed. Coupled with my hate-fueled eagerness to carry out my act of revenge, there was also an extreme sense of fear inside me. Part of me still didn't want to do it. It will mean my death, and I've always been afraid of death. I didn't want to be in Isla Vista on April 26th, the day I had previously planned on carrying out my plans. Hearing all of my enemies partying and having a good time on that day I was supposed to kill them would be all too much. I immediately called my mother and asked her if I could stay at her house for the whole weekend, exaggerating my illness so she would let me. While there, I visited the doctor to ask about the condition of my cold, and I spent the weekend in deep, peaceful contemplation. Upon my return to Santa Barbara, I assured myself that this was it. May 24th, 2014 was the final date. There is no postponing it anymore. No backing out. If I don't do this, then I only have a future filled with more loneliness and rejection ahead of me, devoid of sex, love, and enjoyment. I have to do it. It's the only thing I can do. May 24th is the absolute last weekend in the spring semester in which I can carry out this plan efficiently. After May 24th, the spring semester will end at SBCC, and all of the SBCC students will go back to their hometowns, which means less enemies to kill in Isla Vista. Sure, UCSB would still be in session, but I want to kill both UCSB and SBCC students. The day of retribution is my sole purpose in this world, and I am ready. After only a week passed since I uploaded those videos to YouTube, I heard a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to see about 7 police officers asking for me. As soon as I saw those cops, the biggest fear I had ever felt in my life overcame me. I had the striking and devastating fear that someone had somehow discovered what I was planning to do and reported me for it. If that was the case, the police would have searched my room and found all of my guns and weapons, along with all of my writings about what I planned to do with them. I would have been thrown in jail, denied the chance to exact my revenge on my enemies. I can't imagine a darker hell than that. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. But it was so close. Apparently, someone saw my videos and became instantly suspicious of me. They called some sort of health agency, who called the police to check up on me. The police said it was my mother who called them, but my mother told me it was the health agency. My mother had watched the videos and was very disturbed by them. I don't suppose I'll ever know the full truth of who called the police on me. The police interrogated me outside for a few minutes, asking me if I had suicidal thoughts. I tactfully told them it was all a misunderstanding, and they finally left. If they had demanded to search my room, that would have ended everything. For a few horrible seconds, I thought it was all over. When they left, the biggest wave of relief swept over me. It was so scary. It was all because of those videos. I must have expressed too much anger in them. I immediately took most of them off of YouTube and planned to re-upload them a few days before the day of retribution. This incident made me realize that I needed to be extra careful. I can't let anyone become suspicious of me. All it takes is for one person to call the police and tell them that they think I'm going to perpetrate a shooting, and the police will be coming at my door again, demanding to search my room. For the next few days, I felt extremely fearful that they would show up any time. I kept one of my handbags with a few loaded magazines near me just in case such a thing did happen. If they did show up, I would have to try to quickly shoot them and escape out the back window. I would then have to perform a hasty mockery of my plans with the police on my tail. That'll ruin everything. Thankfully, all suspicion of me was dropped after I took down the videos from YouTube, and the police never came back. During the last few weeks of my life, I continued on my daily adventures around town, trying to experience as much of the world as I could before I die. Upon doing this, I realized that the only world I could possibly ever experience is a twisted world of constant suffering. No matter where I go, I have to face all the same injustices. Young couples are everywhere. They constantly remind me of what I've lacked all my life. There is nowhere in the world I can go anymore. There is no more life to live. The day of retribution is all I have. It is the final solution to all the injustices of this twisted world. By doing this, I will set right all the wrongs I've had to face in my sorry excuse of a life. Every single time I've seen a guy walking around with his beautiful girlfriend, I've always wanted to kill both of them in the most painful way possible. They deserve it. They must be punished. The males deserve to be punished for living a better life and a more pleasurable life than me. And the females deserve to be punished for giving that pleasurable life to all those males instead of me. On the day of retribution, I will finally be able to punish them all. When I think about the amazing and blissful life I could have lived if only females were sexually attracted to me, my entire being burns with hatred. They denied me a happy life, and in return, I will take away all of their lives. It is only fair. I am not part of the human race. Humanity has rejected me. The females of the human species have never wanted to mate with me, so how could I possibly consider myself a part of humanity? Humanity has never accepted me among them, and now I know why. I am more than human. I am superior to them all. I am Elliot Rodger, magnificent, glorious, supreme, eminent, divine. I am the closest thing there is to a living God. Humanity is a disgusting, depraved, evil species. It's my purpose to punish them all. I will purify the world of everything that is wrong with it. On the day of retribution, I will truly be a powerful God, punishing everyone I deem to be impure and depraved. Epilogue. And that is how my tragic life ends. Who would have thought that my life would turn out this way? There is no pride in living as a lonely, unwanted outcast. I wouldn't even call it living. I'm not meant to live such a pathetic, miserable life. That is not my place in this world. I will not bow down and accept such a horrific fate. If humanity will not give me a worthy place among them, I will destroy them all. I am better than all of them. I am a god. Exacting my retribution is my way of proving my true worth to the world. In the midst of my suffering, I have been able to see the world much clearer than others. I have vision that other people lack. Through my suffering, I have been able to see just how twisted and wrong this world really is. The current state of humanity is what makes it wrong. I look at the human race and I see only vileness and depravity, all because of an act known as sexuality. Sex is by far the most evil concept in existence. The fact that life itself exists through sex just proves that life is flawed. The act of sex gives human beings a tremendous amount of pleasure that they don't deserve. No one deserves to experience such pleasure, especially since humans get to experience it while some are denied it. When a man has sex with a beautiful woman, he probably feels like he's in heaven. But the world is not supposed to be heaven. For some humans, to actually be able to feel such heights of heavenly pleasure is selfish and hedonistic. The ultimate evil behind sexuality is the human female. They are the main instigators of sex. They control which men get it and which men don't. Women are flawed creatures, and my mistreatment at their hands has made me realize this sad truth. There is something very twisted and wrong with the way their brains are wired. They think like beasts, and in truth, they are beasts. Women are incapable of having morals or thinking rationally. They are completely controlled by their depraved emotions and vile sexual impulses. Because of this, the men who do get to experience the pleasures of sex and the privilege of breeding are the men who women are sexually attracted to. The stupid, degenerate, obnoxious men. I have observed this all of my life. The most beautiful women choose to mate with the most brutal of men, instead of magnificent gentlemen like myself. Women should not have the right to choose who to mate and breed with. That decision should be made for them by rational men of intelligence. If women continue to have rights, they will only hinder the advancement of the human race by breeding with degenerate men and creating stupid, degenerate offspring. This will cause humanity to become even more depraved with each generation. Women have more power in human society than they deserve, all because of sex. There is no creature more evil and depraved than the human female. Women are like the plague. They don't deserve to have any rights. Their wickedness must be contained in order to prevent future generations from falling to degeneracy. Women are vicious, evil, barbaric animals, and they need to be treated as such. In fully realizing these truths about the world, I have created the ultimate and perfect ideology of how a fair and pure world should work. In an ideal world, sexuality would not exist. It must be outlawed. In a world without sex, humanity would be pure and civilized. Men will grow up healthy without having to worry about such a barbaric act. All men will grow up fair and equal, because no man will be able to experience the pleasures of sex while others are denied it. The human race will evolve to an entirely new level of civilization, completely devoid of the impurity and degeneracy that exists today. In order to completely abolish sex, women themselves have to be abolished. All women must be quarantined like the plague that they are, so that they can be used in a manner that actually benefits a civilized society. In order to carry this out, there must exist a new and powerful type of government, under the control of a divine ruler such as myself. The ruler that establishes this new world order would have complete control over every aspect of society, in order to direct it towards a good and pure place. At the disposal of this government, there needs to be a highly trained army of fanatically loyal troops in order to enforce such revolutionary laws. The first strike against women will be to quarantine all of them in concentration camps. At these camps, the vast majority of the female population will be deliberately starved to death. That would be an efficient and fitting way to kill all of them off. I would take great pleasure and satisfaction in condemning every single woman on earth to starve to death. I would have an enormous tower built just for myself, where I can oversee the entire concentration camp and gleefully watch them all die. If I can't have them, no one will. I'd imagine thinking to myself as I oversee this. Women represent everything that is unfair to this world, and in order to make this world a fair place, they must be eradicated. A few women would be spared, however, for the sakes of reproduction. These women will be kept and bred in secret labs. There, they will be artificially inseminated with sperm samples in order to produce offspring. Their depraved nature will slowly be bred out of them in time. Future generations of men would be oblivious to these remaining women's existence, and that is for the best. If a man grows up without knowing the existence of women, there would be no desire for sex. Sexuality will completely cease to exist. Love will cease to exist. There will no longer be any imprint of such concepts in the human psyche. It is the only way to purify the world. In such a pure world, a man's mind can develop to greater heights than ever before. Future generations will live their lives free of having to worry about the barbarity of sex and women, which will enable them to expand their intelligence and advance the human race to a state of perfect civilization. It is such a shameful pity that my ideal world cannot be created. I realized long ago that there is no way that I could possibly rise to such a level of power in my lifetime with the way the world is now. Such a thing will never become a reality for me, but it did give me something to fantasize about as I burned with hatred towards all women for rejecting me throughout the years. This whole viewpoint and ideology of abolishing sex stems from being deprived of it all my life. If I cannot have it, I will do everything I can to destroy it. My orchestration of the day of retribution is my attempt to do everything in my power to destroy everything that I cannot have. All of those beautiful girls I've desired so much in my life and can never have because they despise and loathe me, I will destroy. All of those popular people who live hedonistic lives of pleasure, I will destroy, because they've never accepted me as one of them. I will kill them all and make them suffer, just as they have made me suffer. It is only fair. Why do things have to be this way? I'm sure that's the question everyone will be asking after the day of retribution is over. They will all be asking why. Indeed, why? That is a question I've had for everyone throughout all of my years of suffering. Why was I condemned to live a life of misery and worthlessness while other men were able to experience the pleasures of sex and love with women? Why do things have to be this way? I ask all of you. All I ever wanted was to love women and, in turn, be loved by them back. Their behavior towards me has only earned my hatred, and rightfully so. I am the true victim in all of this. I am the good guy. Humanity struck at me first by condemning me to experience so much suffering. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. I didn't start this war. I wasn't the one who struck first. But I will finish it by striking back. I will punish everyone, and it will be a beautiful day. Finally, at long last, I can show the world my true worth. And that, dreamers, is the end of his manifesto. So with all of that said, what do we make of Elliot Rodger? Well, like most things in life, I'm not an expert, but if I were to fancy a guess, The first thing that comes to my mind is narcissistic personality disorder. Elliot Rodger was conceited, egotistical, and pretentious, and it not only came across in his manifesto, but in his videos as well. You may have watched them. I did. I sat here and watched them all so I could see this living, breathing human being behind all of this. And for me, everything about that man makes me cringe. The contents of his video are filled with ridiculous, cliché, exclamatory remarks, filled with theatrics and dramatic pauses. His delivery is weird. His laugh is stupid. You can go online and see the videos for yourself. But here I will share the contents of his Retribution video with you. Hi, Elliot Rodger here. Well, this is my last video. It all has come to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution, the day I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you. For the last 8 years of my life, since I hit puberty, I have been forced to endure an existence of loneliness, rejection, and unfulfilled desires, all because girls have never been attracted to me. Girls give their affection and sex and love to other men, never to me. I am 22 years old and still a virgin, never even kissed a girl. And I have been through college 2.5 years, more than that actually. I'm still a virgin. It has been very torturous. College is the time when everyone experiences those things, such as sex and fun and pleasure. In those years, I've had to rot in loneliness. It's not fair. You girls have never been attracted to me. I don't know why you girls aren't attracted to me, but I will punish you all for it. It's an injustice, a crime, because I don't know what you don't see in me. I'm the perfect guy, and yet you throw yourselves at all these obnoxious men instead of me, the supreme gentleman, and I will punish you all for it. Insert evil laugh. On the day of retribution, I am going to enter the hottest sorority at UCSB, and I will slaughter every single spoiled, stuck-up blonde slut I see inside there. All those girls I've desired so much. They have all rejected me and looked down on me as an inferior man. If I'd ever made a sexual advance towards them, while they throw themselves at these obnoxious brutes. I'll take great pleasure in slaughtering all of you. You will finally see that I am, in truth, the superior one, the true alpha male. Insert evil laugh again. Yes, after I have annihilated every single girl in the sorority house, I will take to the streets of Isla Vista and slay every single person I see there. All those popular kids who live such lives of hedonistic pleasure while I've had to rot in loneliness all these years. They all look down upon me every time I've tried to join them. They've all treated me like a mouse. Well, now, I will be a god compared to you. You will all be the animals. You are the animals, and I will slaughter you like animals. I'll be a god exacting my retribution on all of those who deserve it. And you do deserve it, just for the crime of living a better life than me. The popular kids, you never accepted me, and now you have to pay for it. Girls, girls. All I ever wanted was to love you and be loved by you. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted sex, love, affection, adoration. You think I'm unworthy of you. That's a crime I could never get over. If I can't have you girls, I will destroy you. You denied me a happy life, and I, in turn, will deny all of you life. It's only fair. I hate all of you. Humanity is disgusting, wretched, depraved species. If I had it in my power, I would stop at nothing to reduce every single one of you to mountains of skulls and rivers of blood, and rightfully so. You deserve to be annihilated, and I will give that to you. You never showed me any mercy, and I will show you none. You forced me to suffer all of my life, and now I will make you all suffer. I waited a long time for this. I'll give you exactly what you all deserve, all of you. All you girls rejected me, looked down upon me, treated me like scum, while you gave yourselves to other men. And all of you men for living a better life than me, all of you sexually active men, I hate you. I hate all of you. And I can't wait to give you exactly what you deserve. Annihilation. Okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb here as a woman and say, I can totally see why women steered clear of this guy. And honestly, I don't know what to make of this 22-year-long rant. Knowing how his story ends, it's easy to want to hate this guy's guts. But then I have this very tiny twinge of sadness and empathy for the years of pain and suffering and bullying that he endured as well. Just a little bit. Not a whole lot, so don't freak out. He needed some serious help. I think he needed some intervention while he was still a teenager from both his mom and his dad. Probably not his stepmother. Dad seemed super consumed with his career, his new wife, his family. And I don't know what to make of Mom. She undoubtedly loved her son, but what was her deal? She obviously had no trouble attracting wealthy men, but steered clear of commitment, and had years of instability, lots of moving around, and it was evident that the older Elliot Rodger got, the more burdensome he seemed to become for both of his parents. And he was astutely aware of that. I don't know. Then I watched those lame videos he made, and it makes everything so clear why nobody liked this guy. He's obnoxious himself. He calls everyone else obnoxious, but he's the obnoxious one. And he's awkward. I can hardly think of a worse combination of qualities than that. In the month before the tragedy, Rodger's mom did call authorities in Santa Barbara to warn them that she was concerned about her son. And that's what prompted the visit to his home. He was armed. He had those weapons in his apartment. But they did not request a search. They spoke to him and found him to be courteous, quiet, and somewhat timid. And they left. And Rodger was never a second thought until the tragedy rained down on Isla Vista. What they failed to do was run a check on him, look him up online. If they had, they would have seen his YouTube videos for themselves. A series of videos of him ranting, pitying himself and his life. Had they searched his apartment, they would have found his weapons, ammunition, and possibly his manifesto. All that was right there behind them as they stood there speaking to him in his doorway. Rodger's Facebook page was also peppered with hints of what was going on with him. I do believe his Facebook page is no longer accessible. There are a couple of fake accounts up, but not his original. And from those who have had the occasion to look at his Facebook before it vanished, the only thing he ever posted about was himself. It was mostly full of selfies and pictures of his car, and there was only one picture with one other person in it. And Rodger apparently looked completely miserable. And so I've come to the conclusion that in all of his demands to be loved and adored, all of it was going to be in vain. Because the reality is, Elliot Rodger only loved himself. He didn't care about anybody else in the world. He hated his parents. He hated his siblings. He hated the few friends that he had. His envy of them festered into hatred. It would be impossible for anyone to ever show Elliot Rodger love because he was the only one capable of it. He was only capable of loving himself, and people saw that. They knew he was a one-sided, one-dimensional person, and whatever they would be willing to try and give to Rodger would in no way be reciprocated. He was a taker. He was 1000% all about Elliot Rodger and nobody else. And who wants to be a part of that mess? Who'd want to be friends with someone who just takes from you and you gain nothing from being in the relationship, much less wanting to be the girlfriend of such a personality type? Ever been in a relationship with someone who loves themselves more than they love you? I can't say that I have, but if I was, I'm not sure if I saw it, but it would likely have been a relationship doomed from the start. And that is what is at the core of the problems with people who display characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder. They don't care about other people. What other people amount to, for someone like Rodger, is how good can this person make me feel about myself, and what other people can do to boost me up and to make me feel better and superior. And if they don't or can't or won't, then they aren't worthy of his presence. I read an article in Psychology Today, and it said, quote, "Someone with this disorder exhibits a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behavior, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy beginning in early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts as indicated by 5 or more of the following. 1. Has a grandiose sense of self-importance, exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without corresponding achievements." I read you a substantial part of his manifesto, and you have seen some of his videos. Over and over again, he calls himself a supreme gentleman, and that it's the ultimate injustice that women pay no attention to him. I've never seen anyone refer to themselves as this. Maybe there are guys out there that stand in front of the mirror saying this stuff to themselves. Okay, I get it. And maybe that's what he's doing in a sense. He looked for ways to try and make things happen for himself if he willed it enough. He believed in the laws of attraction, or he tried to. If he puts himself out there in the universe that he's a supreme gentleman, then that's going to come back to him. 2. Is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Yep, this nailed Rodger to a T. He had in mind the ideal woman, a beautiful blonde, and he would see others having what he was not having, but didn't really fully grasp the true concept of love, as he was very shallow and materialistic. He's completely puzzled as to why girls aren't ripping his clothes off over his fancy car and Armani sunglasses. His value as a person and his quality of life was solely based on whether or not girls liked him and how many girls liked him. And by doing this, his perception of women tanked. They were objectified as being only a way of measuring his own self-worth, rather than seeing a woman as a very real and a very genuine, a very sentient being. Because women disregarded him, at least that's what his perception was, then they were irrational, senseless, and insignificant. 3. believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should be associated with other special or high status people or institutions. Well, from what we know from his manifesto, he definitely saw himself as elite compared to pretty much everyone else in the world. But to him, it was the world that was wrong because he was superior to all. 4. Requires excessive admiration. It is clear that Rodger wanted this. Now, he doesn't really talk about feelings of being admired, but he kept trying. With the skateboarding, the video gaming, he wanted to show people that he could do these things and gain their admiration. I think he had some glimpses of this, but not nearly as much as he thought he deserved. And he said it himself in several iterations. You will finally see that I'm in truth the superior one. 5. Has a strong sense of entitlement. Oh yeah, this has Elliot Rodger written all over it. For example, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. We saw this over and over again in his manifesto. From the company his family kept, to the movie premieres, to the world travels, he expected this lifestyle to be handed to him, regardless of whether or not he earned it. He expected it. And when it came to women, everything they did he made somehow relevant to himself, despite the fact they never knew he even existed. 6. Is exploitative of others, takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. I'm not sure how much Rodger fits into this category. There wasn't anybody for him to exploit. No one was ever around him. Nobody wanted to be that involved with him. Unless you take his final act of randomly killing people to gain some sense of justice against humanity for not paying attention to him, specifically girls. 7. Lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. Yeah, nowhere through his entire manifesto did I ever see him indicate any sense of empathy. As a matter of fact, in his final year, he began to physically lash out at strangers with complete disregard for others with the intentions of harming them. He threw his coffee at couples. He threw orange juice on kids. You remember he tried to push party-goers off a ledge for ignoring him, and he ended up being the one tossed, resulting in a broken leg. And not to mention, he repeatedly wrote disparaging comments about women and minorities, viewing all of them as less than human. 8. Is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her. Exactly this. I would even go so far to say that it would be envy that wreaked havoc on his entire life, ultimately crushing him. The envy was an overpowering theme throughout his life. Envy was singularly the one thing that crippled him every single moment of every single day. Even one of his videos was entitled Envy, Jealousy, Virginity, Insanity. And 9. Regularly shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Over and over and over again, this comes out in Rodger's writings, in his videos. Oh, his videos. You would at first think, if you didn't know who this guy was, that this was all some sort of elaborate joke. But he's dead serious. He's completely self-absorbed, and he cannot, for the life of him, figure out why nobody else sees it. Here's an idea, Elliot. How about you just be yourself? Be authentic. Be amicable. And stop trying to wave fancy things around in people's faces to try to manipulate them into liking you. That guy had things so backwards. Okay, dreamers. I am kind of pressed for time to get this episode finished. And I'm not going to have the time to discuss some of the topics that I wanted to go over at the end of this. So I'm going to release an addendum episode probably on Tuesday or Wednesday. We're going to talk about the Incel movement, or the beta male uprising. We also had a good long discussion on this case on the Facebook page, and I want to spend some time talking about that as well because you guys had some really insightful things to say. We're also going to take the time to remember the victims of the Isla Vista tragedy. So, as much as I didn't want to drag this out any further than this, I just didn't have the time to get everything in that I wanted to. So keep your eyes on your feed for the addendum. Please feel free to join the discussion page on Facebook. Join and like the pages. Anyone who comments on the Elliot Rodger thread, we're going to talk about your comments in the next addendum. Again, I need to give a big, huge thank you to the administrators and moderators of the page, Darren, Lisa, Valerie, Crystal, and Randy. Thank you so much for all of your help with that. You can also follow us on Twitter at Killafornia Pod and on Instagram at Killafornia Dreaming Pod. Killafornia Dreaming is brought to you by the Orbital Jigsaw Network. We are proud to be a part of an amazing group of podcasts, including The Concession Stand, Busted Wide Open, Super Nerds UK, Historium, 41 Owned, Vox Arcana, and The Podience. If you visit our website, you'll find all of us, our network blog, as well as the merchandise store where you can purchase Killafornia Dreaming coffee mugs or phone cases or tote bags or pillows. All of that stuff is at www.orbitaljigsaw.com. Don't forget to keep your eyes out for the addendum. Thank you so much for joining me for this 3-part series. And until next time, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. And, as always, sweet dreams.
Thank you for letting us in. We are the Haunted Heart, two best friends joined together by a twisted fascination with magic, madness, and the macabre. Join us on our journey where we are sometimes deep.
What? Did the music just cut out?
Oh, shit.
I can't hear it. Kenny, is it?
I can't hear it either.
Did you not get a clip that was long enough for the promo?
Oh, God. Oh, you know what? Fuck it. We're trash talent.
That's a fair point. This is a podcast for people who like trash.
And we are trash.
And we like to talk about all things macabre, witchy, true crime, and anything else our little haunted hearts fancy.
So join us for new episodes every Wednesday.
Tune into The Haunted Heart wherever you listen to podcasts.
And as always, stay spooky.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Lee of Whining About Crime, a story-driven true crime podcast created here in Canada. I try to examine the elements of a crime and how the motives, the victims, and sometimes even the accused stories can teach us something about ourselves and the people we encounter. Can we learn something that can be applied to our own lives? Well, there's only one way to know. You'll know that you found me when you hear me say, please, don't leave me.